So the second interventionist strategy that we end up talking about is EPI. The E is export, the I is industrialisation. The P can be replaced with many letters. In my version, it's export promoting industrialisation. You'll hear it called export substituting industrialisation or export oriented industrialisation. Don't worry too much about exactly what it's called, but the idea is that what you're going to do is, instead of looking inwardly like ISI did, what you're going to do is you're going to target global marketplaces. And these policies have ultimately been pursued by quite a few countries. It's interesting that that often it was there was kind of a divergence in the late 50s, early 60s between Latin America, which continued to pursue ISI, and some of the Southeast Asian economies that switched from ISI to EPI. So South Korea is a good example. They started off with a kind of protectionist policy to build up industries, but they very rapidly switched towards EPI by late 50s, early 60s, somewhere around there. The other point is that, so what you're trying to do is to grow industries that are going to sell stuff to rich countries, basically, which seems like a pretty logical way of going about things. So it has some things in common with liberalisation. If you look at China and Vietnam, a lot of their policies were, on the one hand, kind of aiming to liberalise, but secondly, there was a lot of targeted state control, and particularly towards export sectors. So, for example, China has long kept, well, back then certainly kept the yuan undervalued throughout the 80s, 90s, and early noughties. With the aim of promoting exports. So a lot of these things kind of overlap, and sometimes it can be hard to be exactly sure who's doing what, because in the end, as a government, you're going to do what you think works best for your economy, and whether it's called this or that, you may pull elements from different parts of it. So, but the key is, this is an interventionist strategy, so the government is taking positive, concrete actions to promote industrialisation. And the way they're doing that is by looking at growth sectors in richer countries, in high-income countries. And what they're saying is, well, look, if these high-income countries are growing fast, they're going to have lots of money to buy certain types of goods and services, so we just need to make sure that we pick the ones that have the highest value added that we can make, and that are growing the fastest. So, having decided what that is, you've then got to make the strategy work. And if you look at the countries that have most successfully pursued this, we're talking about the Southeast Asian tigers. So we're talking about the economies of South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. And they all had pretty much a couple of things in common in terms of their approach. I mean, they did it in different ways, but the approach was fairly similar. One was a focus on human capital. So whatever money that they had, whatever money they could raise, they put large parts of it into both health, human capital infrastructure like housing, and education and training. So during the 60s, 70s, the Taiwanese government increased its spending on on education from 7 to 17% of the government's of the budget overall. I'm going to check that. 8 to 18%. Oh, there you go. When in the case of South Korea, huge push for education. Any of you who watched that video, The Secrets of South Korea's success, will have seen the emphasis that the Korean government put onto education. In Singapore, lots of housing built, available at low rent for the population. So you got a high quality, well trained, in the end anyway, workforce. And what you then do is you support that with policy designed to boost investment, and that's an openness to foreign direct investment, but also targeted support for local investment. So what if you look at the economies that succeeded, again, if you look at the Asian tigers, they tended to say, well, look, if you want to do what we say, here is a low-cost loan. So in South Korea, there were heavily subsidised low-cost loans. In Taiwan, any government support was targeted to particular sectors that the government had identified as the ones that they wanted to promote industry. In places like Singapore, the government also built purpose-built factory units that were available for businesses at low rent. So what you've got is this two-pronged approach, which is one, we make sure we've got a high-quality labour force, and two, we make sure that we've got businesses that are going to use them with the aim of targeting export-led growth. So why export-led rather than import substituting? I think if you look at these economies, what you'll find is that they tend to be quite small. I mean, South Korea is big-ish, but the others are all pretty small. So ISI has limits. You're going to be constrained by the size of your domestic market. So you're going to have to look outward. Why not just go for free market policies? Because they simply didn't have the underlying base that's going to allow them to compete. So hence, interventionist policies were still necessary. So you look at the impact. In the 50s and 60s, Taiwan and South Korea were two of the, literally per capita, they were two of the poorest countries in the world, economies. Today, the citizens of those two economies have very, very high GDP per capita. So, and a lot of it has been due to targeting rich country markets successfully, which has obviously then created kind of positive multiplier effects. Of course, in order to get this to work, you've got to be able to gain access to those markets, and you've got to have some underlying financial strength. And all of the four Asian tigers had links with rich countries, generally with either the UK or the US, which made their path a bit easier. So how easy it is to create the very high levels of success that they created is difficult to say. But we can see that countries like Ethiopia are now following the same path or attempting to do so. Maybe it'll be slower, but as a strategy, it seems to make sense.